You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome back to the last call segment of our episode. This is Caroline Lamb, and today I am joined by Alexis Beechen. She is the founder and CEO of an emerging brand of agave wine called Ola Sol. This caught our attention at Business of Drinks for two reasons. It captures a really big gap in the market right now that we've identified, as well as the company's use of artificial intelligence, which is pretty rare in the beverage industry still. So Alexis, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to meet you.
Awesome. So we are going to do a few questions with you, but before we do that, I want you to give us the 1 to 2 minute breakdown of your brand and the key attributes.
Ola Sol is a single estate agave wine from Jalisco, Mexico, made with 100% Blue Weber agave. So just like the best tequilas in the world. The cooking and fermentation process is actually the same as tequila, but instead of distilling, we filter and fortify it. And so it is technically a wine, but it tastes like a light spirit. And agave wine has a lot of benefits that are a great fit for the current drinking environment. Our agave wine is about 50% lower ABV than tequila. We come in at 24% ABV, and we're actually half the calories compared to tequila. So if you think about what people are looking for now, they're looking for those lighter, more sessionable drinks, looking at the RTD craze, whatnot. So our agave wine is a nice, smooth taste, none of that tequila burn that some people fear about tequila. And obviously the low ABV category is showing a lot of momentum. So it's a great category for a young brand like us. And there are other agave wines on the market, but it's been, like you said, a bit of an overlooked category that's really been price driven. So Ola Sol is taking a very different approach. We're creating a premium agave wine that we believe is the purest available on the market. And from a production standpoint, we picked our production partner because they own their own agave fields. They use sustainable farming practices. So we're very proud to say that we're additive free, which is, obviously an interesting, something interesting going on in the tequila agave space right now, but no added sugar, no sulfites. And we're finely filtered using very high quality agave brandy. And we believe that first and foremost, it's the quality of our product that sets us apart. But like you said, we're doing some pretty interesting things to grow our brand and grow our case depletions.
Absolutely. So to my understanding, you're really flipping traditional sales kind of over. You're using AI to warm up your leads before you deploy a salesperson. And this is obviously a little bit more of a Silicon Valley style way of doing sales in the beverage industry that is not only antiquated, but we put so much emphasis on liquid to lips. How many times have I heard that in a sales meeting? So why did you think that was going to work for you?
So we very much still have people, amazing salespeople that are going out there getting liquid to lips. But I think any brand can sympathize with the fact that getting to that liquid to lips meeting requires a huge amount of effort and resources. How many times are you dropping by a restaurant and, you just missed the beverage manager, or no, this isn't the right time for us, come back, next month. And so what we're doing is, giving people a sense of who we are. And if they're interested, they can let us know by opting into a really simple lead gen form. And that just really changes the dynamic so that once our salesperson goes in there, the customer has a sense of who we are. They've thought about how our product will work in whatever their establishment or format is. And it just really makes that liquid to lips meeting a lot more collaborative rather than just dropping by and, trying to sell something, on a cold first sale.
Yeah, absolutely. This reminds me of something I was taught in sales by someone older than me, where they would be on a sales call, and at the end of their sales call, they would drop some type of tech sheet for the thing they were going to bring next time. Say, I'm going to bring this to you next time. And then when they came, the person would say, oh, I've heard of this. And they didn't even remember that the person had told it to them. So it is that, I see that maybe this is the next step of that. That's very fascinating to me. So you were able to share some numbers and in terms of your email marketing campaigns, and you've seen a 51% open rate on your emails. that are sent by AI. And that is turning into a 10% meeting conversion, which in drink sales feels really impressive. So, what does that funnel actually look like behind the scenes, and how did you build that?
Sure. So it started with us figuring out who our target customer was. I was listening to a previous episode of the podcast with Vishal, and he was absolutely right about, you need to first know who your customer is. And for us, the obvious customer for us are beer and wine license holders. So people that can't buy tequila. And so we were actually able to get all of that, their names and addresses. They're publicly available on the California ABC. And from there, it was a matter of using AI to gather some more information like their email addresses and their Instagram handles. And then we used a multi-channel approach to get our message across, not knowing what the best communication channel would be for each potential target customer, whether it's email, direct message, and then we actually did some direct mailers. So, we are, like I said, complementing our marketings with in-person tastings. We don't expect anyone to, once they get that email, to buy Olisol on the spot. We realize that they're going to want to try it and have a conversation because a lot of these folks have never made a cocktail in their establishment before. So, again, it's not just about trying to close, like you said, close that sale on the first contact. It's about, setting up that funnel so that even if they say, they don't respond, they just open the email, we know who those people are. And maybe we send them another email in a few months when the weather gets warmer or, things have changed or they're seeing their competition down the street starting to sell cocktails. So, it's really about, getting more information and getting more people, like you said, aware of it in the beginning so that those final sales calls become easier and more frequent.
Yeah. And what an opportunity for some of these smaller, maybe family run businesses to have a really cool cocktail program to compete with those people who have a Class C license.
Yeah, that's actually been one of the most amazing parts of this is how, cocktails are normally the most profitable thing on a menu. And so to be able to hand over a product to a mom and pop, restaurant or bar that's going to generate 800% ROI, it's so hard in this economic environment to run a profitable small restaurant. So it's a win-win where people would love to have a margarita and, it's giving some really badly needed dollars into these small independent restaurants' pockets.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So tell us about how you're working with complementary products and this is similar to how tech companies work with APIs of other software and your strategy behind linking your product to complementary ones.
Yeah. So, the way I like to think about this is, when you're using a piece of software, you often have other pieces of software that you're running and you want to make it as easy for your end user to be able to connect those two things. And so the way that we think about it in our business is creating cocktail recipes that use other ingredients that are from our distributor. So rather than, just saying, oh, you just use any other rum or any other aperitif, we're calling those out specifically so that the restaurant knows exactly what they need to buy. And it just so happens that the distributor rep that's in front of you sells both of those things. So surprise, surprise, our distributor reps are a bit more excited to be showing off those cocktails and giving, their customers those ideas so that, everyone wins.
Yeah, genius. I mean, a rising tide raises all boats, as they say, and we hear that a lot in these emerging categories. So you've built incentives like equity for your full-time sales hires, and that is virtually unheard of in the beverage space. So tell us how that shifted your team's mindset and their performance.
Sure. It's really about establishing ownership mentality with everyone in the business. Rather than, having our salespeople only be incentivized by, what is my commission structure? What am I going to get paid this month? We want our team to be thinking about building a long-term brand because that's what the management team is thinking about. And, we don't want to have to be looking over our shoulder thinking about like, oh, is someone going to offer them a little bit more money? In which case, of course, if that's the only thing that's incentivizing them, they're going to go somewhere else. So, it's so hard in this industry to find people that can tell your story convincingly and compellingly. And so we feel like if they're helping us build this big thing, this big brand, they should absolutely be compensated for that the way that tech companies incentivize their employees to help build, something big together. This is such a hard business and building a brand requires so many hours and such good people coming together. Why shouldn't they have a big, why shouldn't they have a piece of the pie is how we think.
Absolutely. I think this complements a conversation that we had recently on about a shift that needs to happen in wine education and how we're preparing wine professionals for the workforce. And a lot of that has to do with the workforce not feeling competitive enough to get really high skilled people. So, this is something that I think is really important for people in all categories to hear. So, last question for our segment today. For the founders who are listening, who might be like, okay, how do I get started with this? I don't really know tech that well. I'm a beverage person. How do you dip into the tech enabled sales without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah. So to be fair, we don't have our own developers on staff either. My co-founders do come from a tech background, so we were able to think through how to do this, but we were able to hire an automation firm to do this one discrete project. It's not like we needed a big retainer or anything like that. And they ended up using tools that are off the shelf that really anyone can use, using small monthly subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the scraping of the data did require some AI, and frankly, I couldn't tell you exactly how that was done. But the actual digital communication, sending the emails, creating those direct mail postcards, does not require a technical background. I think the most important thing, like I said, was to figure out who's your target customer, who do you want to meet in these meetings, and that will give you a really specific data set. And then from there, like I said, the tools are at this point pretty easy to use off the shelf, even if you don't have a technical background.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming on, Alexis.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Tap the notification button so you stay in the loop, and help us spread the word by sharing on social and using the star rating. It really helps us find some new listeners. If there's anything you'd like us to cover on the podcast, please reach out. We are on Instagram, LinkedIn. You can message us or at our email at podcast@businessofdrinks.com. We will talk to you next time.